Dust hung in the air like an old curse, refusing to settle as the late afternoon sun beat down on the cracked earth of Dry Fork. The town looked as though it had been abandoned by time itself, would warp from sun and neglect. Signs faded to whispers, and windows either shuttered or broken. The wind didn't howl here. It rasped, as though even it had grown tired of blowing across such an unforgiving place. She came walking down the main street with bare feet and dust-coated skin. Her dress, once white, was the gray of old bone now. She couldn't have been more than 16, but her eyes held the hunger of someone who had seen too many doors shut and too many hands strike. Her name was Clara, but no one in Dry Fork knew that yet. All they saw was a ragged girl who didn't belong. She paused outside the general store, swaying slightly, eyes locked on a sack of flour through the grimy window. Her stomach clawed at her ribs, and her lips were cracked from the sun. Behind the counter, Mr. Barlow counted coins and grumbled to himself, his sons lounging nearby, with boredom in their shoulders and cruelty in their eyes. Clara pushed open the door. The bell above it rang once, sharp as a slap. Barlow didn't look up. "Ain't got nothing for beggars," he muttered. "I'm not begging," Clara said. Her voice was soft but steady. "I'm asking. Just a handful of bread. If you have it, I can sweep. Washington work." One of the sons, Jesse, smirked. "You don't look like you got strength to wash a spoon, girl." "I walked 2 days," Clara said. "My folks, they're gone. I ain't asking for charity. I'm asking to survive." Barlow finally raised his eyes. They were the color of dried mud and about as warm. "This town don't owe you nothing. You want food, you pay for it." Clara reached into the fold of her dress and pulled out a small tin pendant, her mother's. She held it out with trembling fingers. Barlow squinted at it. "This some kind of trick?" "No, it's all I have." He stepped forward, snatched it, and tossed it behind the counter without a second glance. Then he pointed to the door. "Now get." Clara blinked, stunned. "But the food." Jesse stepped in front of her. "You deaf, girl?" He said get. Barlow's other son, Wade, moved behind her, and in that moment, Clara realized the mistake she'd made. It wasn't just hunger that made these men cruel, it was habit. When she didn't move quickly enough, Jesse shoved her hard. She fell to her knees, hands scraping on the warped floor. Laughter followed. Wade grabbed her arm to pull her up roughly, but Clara twisted away. That's when the first blow came, a kick to her ribs that knocked the wind from her. The second came before she could cry out. Outside, a few townsfolk paused, then looked away. Everyone knew Barlow ran his store the way he ran his family, mean and unquestioned. The door banged open again. A man stepped through, quiet as a shadow. "Enough." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The weight behind it stopped the room cold. Jesse froze mid-swing. Wade took a step back. The man looked like he'd been carved from the same earth that punished this town. Broad shoulders beneath a faded brown coat, a thick beard peppered with gray, eyes that didn't flinch. He wore the dust like he was born in it. He walked with a slight limp, but there was no weakness in him. "Who the hell are you?" Barlow barked, puffing up. The man didn't answer. Instead, he crouched next to Clara, touched her shoulder gently, and looked her in the eye. "You hurt?" She didn't answer, just shook her head and bit her lip. A line of blood ran from her temple. He offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Barlow spat. "This ain't your business, stranger." The man stood slowly. "It is now." Whispers had started outside, people inching closer to the door. One of them muttered, "Ain't that Eli Garrett?" Barlow heard it too. His bluster wavered. "Now," Eli said calmly, "I'm going to walk out that door with the girl. You're not going to follow, and you're not going to speak to her again. You understand me?" Jesse opened his mouth to argue, but one look from Eli turned him to stone. Clara leaned against him as they stepped out into the fading sunlight. The street had quieted. A few women stood behind laundry lines, holding their breath. Men leaned on posts, pretending they weren't watching. Eli didn't speak until they reached the edge of town. Then he looked down at her. "You got a name." "Clara," she whispered. "Well, Clara, you're safe now." She looked up at him. "Why'd you help me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out over the plains, where the sun dipped low and red over the canyon line. His jaw worked, but whatever words he wanted stayed buried in his throat. Finally, he said, "Because someone should have." And they walked on into the falling dusk, the desert wind rising again, this time carrying with it the quiet start of a new tale, one that hadn't yet been told. The ride to Eli's ranch was long and silent, broken only by the wind and the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them. Clara leaned against him, not out of trust yet, but because she had no choice. Her body trembled from exhaustion, her thoughts tangled with everything that had happened. The man didn't speak, didn't ask questions, didn't offer comfort with words, but his grip on the reins was steady, and she somehow knew he wouldn't let her fall. The ranch appeared like a mirage at the edge of the canyon country, weathered fencing, a single barn, and a low house of adobe and rough timber, perched against the sandstone cliffs. There were no hired hands, no barking dogs, no smoke from other chimneys, just silence, the kind that echoed. Eli helped her down and guided her into the house. The air inside smelled of cedar and old paper. Sparse furniture, clean floors, shelves lined with books, and a few worn tools. A faded photograph sat alone on the mantel, 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a young girl. "Bathrooms out back," he said gruffly. "Water pump's cold this time of day. There's stew warming on the stove. You eat first." Clara nodded, grateful for food, though her eyes lingered on the photograph longer than she meant to. Something about the way he avoided looking at it told her more than words could. That night, she slept in a small room that still held the scent of lavender under the dust. A child's room once, she guessed. She lay curled on her side beneath the hand-stitched quilt, listening to the creak of the wind across the rafters and the occasional clink of Eli's boots on the porch. He didn't lock the door. He didn't hover. He just let her be. That, more than anything, unsettled her. No man had ever shown her mercy without asking for something in return. By morning, she was already sweeping the porch. Eli didn't thank her. He simply handed her a tin cup of coffee and nodded once. It became a pattern. She worked. He said little. They shared meals in silence, broken occasionally by questions so sparse they came like rain in the desert. "You from East?" he asked once, while repairing a fence post. "Near Carthage," she said. "We had a farm. Until the fire." He didn't ask how the fire started, and she didn't ask why the barn had 3 unused stalls, but only 1 horse. Still, she learned things. Eli rose before dawn and spent most evenings in the canyons. He moved slowly but deliberately, a limp in his left leg that he never mentioned. He handled tools like he'd built half the world with his bare hands. Sometimes Clara caught him watching the horizon, eyes distant, like he expected something, or someone, to come riding out of it. One afternoon, while she hung laundry, a rider approached. Clara froze, but Eli had already stepped out onto the porch, his shadow stretched long by the lowering sun. The man dismounted, a drifter by the look of him, sun-worn and travel-stained. He removed his hat and nodded. "Didn't mean to spook anyone," the stranger said. "Just passing through. Heard Eli Garrett had a well and maybe a place to rest the night." "You heard wrong," Eli said, but he didn't reach for a weapon. The man tilted his head. "Heard something else, too, that you used to ride with a badge. Marshal Garrett, they called you." Clara turned slightly, watching Eli. He didn't react, didn't flinch, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the heat. "That was a long time ago," he said finally. The stranger nodded, respectful. "Folks also saying the Boone brothers are riding west. Already hit 2 ranches near Smoke Bluff. Left no one breathing." "I'm not a lawman," Eli said, voice flat. "Didn't say you were." The drifter looked at Clara. "You got a good heart, tucking her in." "I didn't do it for her," Eli said. "I did it for me." The drifter didn't ask what that meant. He just mounted up and rode on without another word. That night, Clara stood by the fence, arms folded tight around herself, watching Eli as he sat near the dying firelight. She'd seen the look in his eyes earlier, something between dread and readiness. A man trying to bury a part of himself that refused to stay down. "Who were they?" she asked, voice barely above the wind. He didn't turn. My wife. And my daughter. I saw the photo. They were killed, he said quietly. 10 years ago. A gang came through, looking for someone else. Wrong house. Wrong time. She waited. I was away. Tracking a bounty. Came back to ashes. I'm sorry, she said. He didn't answer. Later, as the stars spread across the black sky like scattered bones, she asked one more question. Why do you go into the canyon every evening? He was quiet a long while. Then, that's where I talked to him. A long silence settled between them, not awkward but deep, like the hush of a church. Clara didn't say anything more. She simply nodded once, and for the first time since she arrived, Eli looked at her with something other than weariness. The past still lived on that ranch, howling quietly through every plank and post. But now, for the first time in years, Eli wasn't alone with it. He had a ghost of his own, walking and breathing and sleeping under his roof. A girl who reminded him too much of what he'd lost, and maybe, just maybe, what he could still protect. And somewhere far off, carried on the wind, came the faint sound of hooves. Not yet near, but approaching. Smoke rose over Dry Fork, like a warning written in the sky. Clara saw it first from the rise behind the barn, where she'd been gathering eggs. A thick black column, churning into the heavens, turning the sunset the color of old blood. Her breath caught. She dropped the basket and ran toward the house. Eli was already saddling his horse. His rifle lay across the porch bench, cartridges lined beside it in neat, practiced rows. He moved with a quiet urgency that made Clara's pulse quicken. He didn't ask her what she saw. He already knew. That's the general store, she said, breathless. That's Dry Fork. Eli didn't look at her. Stay here. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone. No, she said. If it's them, the Boone brothers, you can't go alone. He tightened the cinch on the saddle. If it is them, I sure as hell won't take a half-starved girl with me. I'm not helpless. He turned to her then, slow, eyes hard as flint. You don't understand what they are. Clara stepped closer. And you don't understand what it's like to be left behind. That stopped him. For a moment, his jaw tensed, and she saw the old battle rage behind his eyes. But he didn't argue again. He handed her the rifle instead. You ever shoot one of these? She nodded. Once. Hit a coyote. It ran off. He took a deep breath. Don't aim to scare this time. They rode together, fast and low along the canyon edge, cutting through dry gullies and over cracked riverbeds. The closer they got, the thicker the smoke became. The town's outline shimmered in the heat haze, a crooked skeleton against the firelight. When they crested the final hill, Clara's stomach turned. Dry Fork burned. The general store was caved in, flames licking at the wood like hungry tongues. The saloon was rubble. Barlow's home, empty, doors swinging, smoke curling from the roof like a dying breath. Bodies lay scattered in the dirt. Not many. The Boone brothers didn't leave many. Eli reined in his horse. Clara halted beside him. Stay close, he said, and stay quiet. They rode in slow, scanning alleys and shadows. The town was eerily still, like violence had sucked the breath out of it. A few chickens scurried past. A dog whined behind a half-collapsed wagon. Why here? Clara asked softly. Why now? Because Dry Fork's weak, Eli said. They're looking for something easy to take before they move east. Move east. He glanced at her. You said Carthage. Her mouth went dry. Gunfire cracked from the far end of town. Eli didn't flinch. He kicked his horse forward, rounding the corner toward the church. Clara followed, heart pounding. They found them behind the chapel. 5 men, filthy and broad-shouldered, faces smeared with soot and arrogance. One of them held a torch. Another kicked at the church door, where a cluster of townsfolk, maybe a dozen, had barricaded themselves inside. A woman screamed from within. Eli dismounted. Clara's blood froze as she saw him walk forward alone, rifle slung low, hand near his holster. One of the men turned. Look what we got here. Some dusty hero come to pray before dying. The others laughed. Eli didn't. I counted 5. Eli said calmly. That mean the other two are dead already? That drew silence. Then one of the Boone men squinted. I know you. Garrett, right? Marshall Garrett. Thought you crawled in a bottle years ago. I did, Eli said. Then I crawled out. The one with the torch grinned. We're just passing through. Ain't no need for trouble. Eli raised his voice, just enough to carry. You burned a town. Beat a girl near to death. I call that trouble. From behind the church door, someone gasped. The torchbearer sneered. You're outgunned. Clara stepped from behind the trough, rifle braced, barrel leveled. Now he's not. The man's grin faltered. Eli didn't look back at her, but a faint smile touched his mouth. You got two chances, he said. 1, drop your guns and walk away. 2, draw, and find out how fast a ghost can pull iron. For a long, breathless moment, the air seemed to stop moving. Then one of the Boone men moved. The sound was thunder, 6 shots in 2 seconds. Clara fired once, instinct and terror guiding her. One outlaw spun, shrieked, and dropped. Eli was faster than the others. His first shot took the torchman in the neck. His second dropped the one with the shotgun before it left his hip. The fourth man ran. The fifth reached for his belt, but fell before he could touch steel. Then it was quiet again, smoke curling from gun barrels like spirit smoke. Clara stood frozen, chest heaving. Her knees buckled, but she didn't fall. Eli holstered his weapon and walked past the bodies. Inside, he called. It's safe now. The door creaked open. A gaunt woman stepped out, face streaked with soot. Behind her came others, Mr. Barlow's wife, the old postmaster, a few children. They stared at Eli like they were seeing a legend crawl out of the dust. No one said thank you. No one needed to. Later, as the sun dipped below the rim of the canyon, Clara sat on the church steps, watching Eli patch his arm where a bullet had grazed him. She hadn't noticed the blood until it stained his shirt. You all right? He asked, glancing at her. She nodded slowly. I think so. You? He winced as he tied the bandage. I've been worse. They were quiet for a while, watching smoke drift up to a sky gone violet. I thought I was done, Eli said. With all of it. The fight. The cause. You saved them, Clara said. He looked at her then, long and searching. You did too. She met his gaze. Doesn't feel real yet. It won't, he said. Until the next time. Clara didn't speak. Somewhere deep down, she knew he was right. A wind stirred the ashes in the street. And far off, in the darkness beyond the hills, something unseen was already listening. The next morning, Clara rose before the sun. The ranch was quiet, its scars from the night before already fading into the dust. The wind rolled across the plain in slow, thoughtful waves. Somewhere near the barn, a horse stamped once, then settled. The smell of charred wood still clung faintly to her clothes, but she didn't scrub it off. It felt earned. Eli was already out back, shirt sleeves rolled, hammer in hand. He was rebuilding a gate the Boones had kicked down on their last ride through, though Clara hadn't known that until he muttered it with a nail between his teeth. The way he drove each nail was methodical, steady, like it was his way of keeping the dark from creeping back in. She walked over and leaned on the fence post. They'll come again, she said quietly. They might. They'll come for revenge. Eli stopped hammering. He set the tool down and turned to face her. They'll expect a rancher with a limp and a girl who's still too thin. Clara met his eyes. They'll be right about one of those. He gave a small, crooked grin. Which? She tilted her chin. Try me and find out. There was silence between them for a breath, and then he nodded, like something old and buried had just shifted in him. We'll train, he said. Every morning. Every night. You'll learn to shoot, ride, track, fight. If they come, they'll find more than a burned-out ranch. What'll they find? Eli paused, looking at her the way you'd study a storm on the horizon. Curious, cautious, maybe even hopeful. A new legend. Word of what happened in Dry Fork traveled faster than the wagons. By the end of the week, a rider from Carthage brought a letter. The sheriff wanted Eli's account. 2 days later, a battered widow arrived with her son, asking if the ranch had space for 2 more. Eli didn't say much, just pointed to an empty bunkhouse, and went back to mending a fence. Clara greeted them with bread she'd learned to bake 2 nights before. She shared the little she had, like someone who knew what it meant to go without. The days turned to weeks, and the ranch changed. It no longer stood quiet at the end of a forgotten trail. Word spread that Eli Garrett, the ghost of the frontier, had risen from the ashes. But the real whispers were about the girl, about how she'd stood behind a dying church and leveled a rifle with hands that hadn't stopped shaking since she'd first asked for food. They said the girl never flinched. They said the ranch wasn't just a ranch anymore. It was a refuge, a place where broken men and cast-out women found something close to worth again, where ex-scouts taught orphans to track wild game, and scarred mothers taught young girls to load a revolver by candlelight. The Boone brothers sent word, then they sent scouts, then they sent fire, and each time, someone met them at the fence line. Eli, Clara, sometimes the widow with the sharp eyes, sometimes 3 children with slingshots and stubborn jaws. But they never found fear there, only resolve. One night, as lightning stitched the sky beyond the canyon, Clara stood at the gate, watching the horizon. Eli joined her, arms crossed. "They say the Boones have a new leader," she said. "Doesn't matter. They're gathering numbers. So are we." She turned toward him. "You think we'll win?" He thought a moment. "Then, that depends. On what? On what kind of story we want this place to become." She looked back at the plain. Her voice was steady. "Then I want one they'll still be telling long after we're bones in the ground." Eli smiled, slow and proud. "Then we've already won. That winter was hard. The wind howled like an animal possessed, and the water troughs froze solid before dawn. But the ranch held strong. The fences stayed mended. The gates stayed locked. And in the evenings, after the long work was done, Clara would read by the fire, books Eli had kept hidden in an old trunk he swore no one would want. History, war, survival, and sometimes poetry. By spring, Clara could outshoot every man on the property, Eli included. She moved with a quiet confidence, the kind no one could take away. The bruises from her first day in Dry Fork had faded, but her memory hadn't. She remembered every face that turned away, every boot that kicked her when she begged, every lip that curled when she dared to speak. And she remembered the hand that reached for hers, dirt-streaked and steady, and said, "You're safe now." One evening, a boy from Dry Fork rode up the trail, wide-eyed and breathless. "A gang was coming," he said. 10 riders, maybe more, armed to the teeth. Clara didn't panic. She loaded her rifle. She strapped on her belt. She called the others, Eli, the widow, the boys from the bunkhouse. No one asked what to do. They already knew. That night, firelight danced on the hilltop, but the gang didn't ride closer. Not when they saw the figures standing along the ranch's edge, shoulders squared, eyes sharp, weapons gleaming under the stars. The Boones didn't ride in. They rode around. In town, they whispered about it for months. About how a girl once came begging for bread, and the town turned her away. About how she rose behind a rifle, beside a ghost of a man who once wore a badge, and built something stronger than any lawman could. Some said she was a spirit. Others said she was vengeance. But those who knew better called her what she was. The girl who became the warning. And the ranch became legend.